Ya ba 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 bum 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 bum. Ya ba 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 bum 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 bum. Ya ba 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 bum 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 bum. Ya ba 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 bum 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 bum.
Good morning, my name is Jeff Warschauer. I'm here at CLES Canada. I'm a former artistic director of this institution and very happy to be here doing everything and experiencing everything that CLES Canada has to offer. Here I'm teaching a pluck string class and also running an ensemble, co-running an ensemble having to do with making your Friday night services Hamish and very klezmerish and very Hasidic sounding, so very Eastern European sounding. So working with a wonderful group of people doing that. I've been a Yiddish musician for about 30 years, klezmer musician on guitar and mandolin, and a singer of Yiddish songs. I'm actually currently in cantorial school at Jewish Theological Seminary and also getting a master's, second master's in modern Jewish studies there. So I teach and perform all over the world, in North America and in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, a little bit in Australia and New Zealand. And I've had the wonderful fortune and honor to work with Theodore Bikel on many occasions.
Can you tell me about your experiences working with Theo?
Sure. Well, the first time I work with my wife, Deborah Strauss. We have a duo, and we were teaching at a workshop in LA, I guess many years ago at this point. And Theo and his wife, who's unfortunately passed away way too early, Tamara Brooks, were teaching and performing at the same festival. And we actually did a concert with them. And that was the first time we worked with Theo, and it was actually the first time we met Theo. The way we met Theo was we were invited to a Hanukkah party. He invited us actually to a Hanukkah party one of the nights we were there, so we were very excited about that. And we went to the Hanukkah party, and we show up at the door. It's in, I think, West Hollywood, and we show up at the door, and we knock on the door, and the hostess comes to the door and says, "Who are you?" She had no idea who we were and what we were doing there, and we said, oh, Theo invited us, and she said, "Oh yeah, he does that," and she invited us in. It was really a wonderful party, and you know, I had known, Deborah and I grew up with Theo's music, and we knew him, you know, as a star of Jewish music and folk music and an actor, and you know, he was this kind of this distant figure. But what we found out at that party was, you know, he just loves to hang out and jam and sing songs. And he seems to know about thousands of songs, really, in many languages. And it's all here. He doesn't use a word sheet, you know, he's like, it's unbelievable. He's just a font of songs and stories. And he was just very Hamish. He was really welcoming and extremely sweet and you know, open to anything, and really, you know, to us he was and is a superstar, you know, and so he was just like surprisingly down to earth and just fun to hang out with, and so we just felt really welcomed, and from then on with him and with Tamara, we felt, you know, just part of the scene, part of the family, and anytime we'd see him, we'd get to, you know, we'd be in town, we'd get together and sometimes perform together, or sometimes just hang out. So.
Do you believe the addition to folk music has been a positive or negative influence to klezmer?
Yeah. Oh, well, first of all, you know, his whole approach of being very international, you know, is a very wide open approach. He appreciates and makes clear his appreciation of all different cultures. And I think that's a really wonderful quality of his. And it's something that's in the folk scene, but I think he's really someone who made Yiddish music and Jewish music accepted as part of the folk scene, you know. I mean, I grew up, I was a kid in the 60s and early 70s, and, you know, my parents were fans of folk music, and Theo's records were in our house, and, you know, he was a big part of the folk revival, and he just made, you know, he made he made Jewish music part of that, not to mention all the things he did in Russian and all those other languages as well. So yeah, it's been very positive, and one thing about Jewish music, it can get very, I mean, I hate to use the word, but it can get kind of ghettoized in a sense. I mean, where, especially in North America, where the only people who listen to it are Jews, which, by the way, is not true at all in other parts of the world. Jewish music is seen, you know, as a recognized kind of music that's interesting to non-Jews as well. But he really kind of opened up the audience to that, and plus, his Yiddish song albums are just, you know, there's no one who's singing Yiddish music who hasn't learned from them, hasn't learned some. It's been only positive. The other thing I should say about his attitude is I can tell you when you give lectures about Yiddish, and especially about Yiddish songs in a public forum, you know, it's not something like this where everyone who's here is a fan already. It's like preaching to the choir, so to speak. But when you do something in a public forum, you know, in New York City or something, there's usually a guy, you know, who gets up and in a Hebrew accent says, you know, why all this Yiddish? You know, Hebrew is the national language. You know, I can't do a Hebrew accent very well, but that guy gets up, and you know, and it happens all the time, you know. And what Theo says is, you know, why do we have to choose between the two? Hebrew is a beautiful language, and Yiddish is a beautiful language, and they're both integral to Ashkenazic Jewish culture, and really part of the whole Jewish story, and the story of humanity. So why do we have to choose? You know, we don't have to. And you know, Theo is an absolutely wonderful Hebrew actor and singer too. You know, so I think that's been very positive. It's not an either or situation. I think he's been very influential. I think also he's a political activist, but a very measured one. You know, he's supportive of Israel, but not without questioning policies that he disagrees with, and I think that's very brave. And he's been an inspiration to lots of us about how you speak up and when you choose to speak up and the ways you choose to speak up in defense of Israel, but also in criticism of certain policies. And I think that's been a big influence also.
Well, as a Yiddish singer and a cantor, how has he influenced your style personally?
Well, it's just inevitable. I mean, especially you can't grow up singing, you know, learning to sing Yiddish and not be influenced by Theo, like whether it's conscious or not. I mean, his versions of Yiddish songs are just they're seminal. You know, it's like everyone hears them and they influence. And then, you know, I'm a guy, you know, a baritone, you know, and I play guitar, and so it's kind of like you know, if you were a classical harpsichordist, you know, it's kind of like asking, you know, has Bach influenced you? You know, it's like there's no way around it. So especially for someone, you know, I mean, I'm a guy singing with a guitar, you know, and it's like, yes, Theo has been incredibly influential, and he's just very personable and down to earth in performance too. He's a great performer, and so I have to say, you know, now that I'm becoming a cantor, I'm sure a lot of what I do as a cantor is influenced by the way I sing. I sing Jewish folk music, and you know, and whether it's Hebrew or Yiddish, and I think Theo's a big part of that. So yes, it's definitely influenced, you know, and will influence my cantorate as well.
Is there a favorite work by Bikel that you could think of at the moment?
Yeah, well, I love his version of Zog Jamil Revenue, was wird sein, as Mashiach wird kommen, as Mashiach wird kommen, will wir machen das so, then you. That's it's just great. I mean, you know, and there are lots of versions of that, and they're all good, but that to me is just very important. You know, Donna, everyone learned his Donna, and it was just so much. I mean, I can't. And by the way, I mean, I'm not a Russian speaker, but his Russian recordings are fantastic too. They're really great.
What contributions do you feel that Theo has made to contemporary Jewish music?
Well, Contemporary meaning what? Like when are we talking? Like right now?
Right now. Right here at
now.
Klez Canada.
Yeah, right here at Klez Canada. I think that, well, you know he was here. And when I was artistic director, we brought him here a couple of years, along with Tamara. And it was like, you know, not quite like the Messiah had come, but, you know, somewhere in that direction. And so I think everyone was, you know, naturally blown away by him. And then the other thing is part of his openness is he's really open to working with people like Deborah and me, but also people were younger, like, you know, so-called Josh Dogan, and you know, he's collaborated with a lot of people in this scene, or just hung out and played. So that's a huge influence beyond his recorded output.
How do you personally foresee the direction of the future of klezmer music?
That's a really good question, but it's almost impossible to answer because everything has been completely unpredictable, you know, up to this point. You know, you look at what's going on, you look at the concerts that are going on here, and, you know, who would have imagined it? I mean, I remember, like, back in the 80s, you know, people were pretty much learning from old 78 recordings and also from some informants such as, you know, Leon Schwartz and people like that, Max Epstein, and, you know, some of the older players really learning, Sid Beckerman, learning from them. But it was very much kind of a stage of reproduction. It was like we were learning how to play the tradition in a certain way. And then, of course, what happens is, you know, creative people make the musical vocabulary their own, and then create their own works from knowing how to speak that musical language. In addition to, you know, if they're writing lyrics in Yiddish or lyrics in English that are thematically, you know, that fit somehow. You know, that's also commenting on the tradition. You know, the class that I subbed for Hankus, you know, we were talking about the very Jewish, it's not just Jewish, it's in other cultures, but the very Jewish tradition of studying, and your role in studying is to learn the tradition so well, but then question the tradition, and then make your own comments in each generation on the tradition that build on that tradition, but have something new to say. You know, I think that that's going on all over Klez Canada, and the future of klezmer music, I think, will continue to be that kind of commentary. But how it will manifest itself it's not predictable. I mean, I wouldn't even try, because the great thing about it is it's so surprising. You know, so how do you predict surprises? You know, it knocks them more out. So, you know.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
Hi, I'm Josh, so-called Dalgan, a klezmer musician and a hip-hop producer.
As a modern klezmer musician, where does most of your influence come in the process of making your music?
As a modern klezmer musician, to be honest, basically 100% of the inspiration for the music that I make comes from primary sources, for the most part, if I can find things from old recordings, 78s even, back to the dawn of recording technology, and sheet music that was printed in a time when klezmer music was really a living tradition. I mean, it's still living, but when it was a more living part of the Yiddish culture.
And as Theodore Bikel, does he influence your style at all in the music you play?
I mean, actually, Theodore Bikel's records were some of the first Jewish records I ever heard. They were part of my parents' record collection. And as a hip-hop producer, it was really vinyl collecting that was the key to me becoming like a working producer, was just going around and collecting old records. And the first records that I collected were from my parents' record collection. And the first Jewish records, the only Jewish records really that were in there, and certainly the only Yiddish songs were from the repertoire of Theodore Bikel. So I'm not sure he influenced me, but he was the first sort of really Yiddish music that I probably ever heard growing up.
Do you believe that through his addition to folk music that he's been a positive or negative influence to contemporary klezmer?
He's been positive. I mean, he sold millions of records, and at a time when Yiddish music was really moribund, like there wasn't really anybody doing it, he was putting out records in the 50s and 60s of Yiddish songs. And he has such a high profile as sort of a Hollywood Broadway star that because he was dealing with that repertoire, I'm sure that had a huge impact on sort of secularizing American Jewish culture.
And what is your favorite work by Bikel, if you had to narrow it down?
I mean, I'm partial to the songs that were smuggled out of Russia, out of Soviet Russia. I can't remember what the name of that album is called, but that's Silent No More, it's called. And my parents had that record, and it's beautiful arrangements of amazing songs. He also did this amazing sort of reading of the Old Testament. It's like fully arranged with like an orchestra. That's like awesome. He also did it's called The Fifth Cup. It's the Seder record that he did with this guy Gershon Kingsley, who was sort of a synthesizer, an early synthesizer expert guy, who's famous for writing the song Popcorn, which is an amazing synthesizer song. So they did this very trippy, like 60s, like hallucinatory Seder album. That's pretty cool too. But I literally have probably this many Theodore Bikel vinyls, which isn't bad. I even have his first one, which is on Elektra. It's not an LP, it's a EP. And when Theo came to Montreal to do this show and I played piano with him, I accompanied him for 2 weeks. I think that was last year. Well, he came to my apartment and we hung out a couple times, and he signed that EP.
Do you sample any of his stuff in the making of your music?
Probably I do sample some Bikel. I haven't done it lately. I'm absolutely positive it's happened. I mean, when I have this many records from somebody, I'm sure I'm going to use part of it somewhere. Yeah, but more than sampling him, I mean, as you know, I don't know if you know, but you've heard that Mein Steht Labelle song. Have you heard it? So there, I mean, I recorded him, you know, and brought him into a studio and got him to actually perform a song with the fat beats and with the sort of, and then I made it into a huge, crazy production. So, I mean, I've actually worked with him, like his live voice. And then he sang, while he was in the studio, I said, sing that family niggin that you sing. So he sang that yabba-ba-ba-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum, yabba-ba-ba-bum-bum-bum-bum, which is this awesome, catchy niggin that he says that he grew up hearing. And that became sort of the basis of the introduction of my album Ghetto Blaster. And then at the end of the album, I just put the original full niggin. And last year, when he was in Montreal, I was having my CD release party for my new record, which is called Sleepover. And in this packed house, I got Bikel. He showed up for the CD release, and we sang the song called The Spring Hill Mine Disaster, which is a beautiful Canadian folk song that he knew, and he actually knows who wrote it. He knew Peggy, what's her name? I can't remember. It's stupid because her last name is very famous, because her brother is very famous. Anyway, so he sang that with us, and then I started singing yabba-ba-ba-bum-bum-bum-bum. And this audience of probably 500, basically French Canadians, all started to sing along because they'd learned it from my last album. So there's Bikel, 87 years old, seeing you know, his legacy really being passed on for real.
Is there a part of Bikel's career that you don't enjoy so much, or least favorite part?
No, I mean, whatever. As I know how it is to be an artist. You gotta do what you gotta do to make it. Sometimes your art comes first. Sometimes you gotta make money. Sometimes you're making money making amazing art. Sometimes you're making a lot of money making horrible art, and vice versa. So, Like when he's on TV, like that's awesome. When he's in All in the Family as the butcher with Edith, have you seen that?
Yeah.
I mean, he plays Worf's father in Star Trek. He was on the Love Boat. He's in the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the Twilight Zone. I mean, he's in every show ever that was ever filmed. So that's cool. I mean, and then he played Tevye, you know, which is an interesting thing too, because he became the face of this sort of fake Jewish shtetl. And in a way, there's something a little jive about that whole role in that play, and just there's something a little, I don't know, like sort of Jewish blackface about that play. And so as the face of that's problematic too. But he always performed it with such integrity and with such amazing just skill as an actor. So whatever. No, I don't judge his career at all.
And finally, how do you foresee the direction of the future of klezmer music, being someone who's active on the front?
Well, when I'm making my pop and my weird like hip hop and house and stuff, I don't call it klezmer. There's maybe klezmer elements in it, and I might have taken a klezmer tune or some Yiddish lyrics and turned them into a different song. But I don't pretend that that's klezmer. As for pure klezmer, it's a toughie because it's not 1899, you know, it's the 21st century, and we have new technology, and we have new ways of dancing together, and new ways of you know, being communities, and we're not stuck in ghettos where cultures sort of are created and styles are born, but like people are separated. Like now it's a global world. We have access to so many different styles. To me, it's just a little disingenuous, especially in klezmer, which has always been about fusion and has always been about taking different styles and sharing with whoever, wherever the Jews were. They took music and used it or shared their music with their neighbors. So in this incredibly global village that we live in now, I mean, who knows what the future of klezmer is, but like as a person who doesn't believe in purity and in like the real thing, I think there's incredible potential.
Hi, my name is A.C. Dolgan. I'm so-called Josh Dolgan's mother, Mrs. So-called.
And what can you tell me about Theodore Bikel?
Oh, just that I remember from the 60s, he was an idol of ours. We were into folk singing, and he was such an internationalist. He sang in millions of different languages, and it was our first exposure to African music and other worlds. He opened a whole world of music to us.
And how did he influence you in the 60s?
In that way, just to learn other languages and to learn other songs, and we loved it. We loved him. And then we've met him through Klez Canada here and through Josh, and have had meals with him and just found what a warm, open, wise person he was. Yeah, is. Sorry.
Do you think he's been a positive or negative influence to folk music and to klezmer music?
Well, positive, plus.
How so has he been positive?
Just the richness that he's given. He explored the field. He gathered in music, and then he shared it with people in so many languages, and it was unbelievable gifts that he had, and has. I don't know why I'm thinking of his wife who has passed away, but he's very much alive. He just did a couple of shows in Montreal, and his voice was as good as ever, and his presentation, he did, I don't know, 5 or 6 performances a week, performing at the Segal Center, doing a couple of shows. Josh played piano for one of them, and it was delightful, absolutely wonderful show. It's great.
My name is Erwin Block, and I'm a journalist in Montreal.
What can you tell me about Theo Bikel?
Theodore Bikel is a well-known actor. He's also well-known as an activist and as a folk singer.
And what do you think his influence has been in general to klezmer music?
I don't think his influence has been very big at all in klezmer music. He sang a bit of klezmer, Jewish music, not just klezmer, in the early 60s. And he wasn't really part of the klezmer revival that started in the 80s. It was younger groups like the Klezmatics and other groups like that in the U.S. that were part of this revival. And but he's a jack of all trades. He's a great actor. He's a great singer. And as part of his repertoire, he includes some Yiddish songs.
What's your favorite part about Bikel's musical work? What do you enjoy most about it?
Well, he has a great voice, fantastic voice, deep baritone, and he speaks many languages, and his Yiddish is excellent. And he's also great in other languages. And as I say, because I first heard him in the late 50s and early 60s, his influence was mainly as part of the folk revival back then. And as I say, not as a prime player in the klezmer Yiddish music revival of the 80s and of the 1980s.
So although he hasn't made a contribution necessarily per se directly to klezmer music, do you believe he's made a contribution to Jewish music?
He's made a contribution to appreciation of various forms of folk music, including Jewish music, Russian music. He opened people's, in the 60s when he first started singing and recording, he opened people's ears to the sounds of other folk groups.
Do you relate your liking of Jewish music to your influence by Bikel, listening to Bikel in the early 50s, 60s?
No. Bikel was, it was just part of his repertoire. He wasn't a specialist back then in Jewish music, although he did have a couple of albums. There were plenty of other people who were doing it in the 60s, like Martha Schlama, who was much more. She was a specialist in Yiddish music, and he was just part of the revival of interest in music of other cultures that started in the 60s, and Jewish music and some klezmer was only part of it.
Can you say there's a least favorite part of Bikel's work, whether it be his career in acting, his career in singing, that you don't enjoy, that you don't appreciate?
Well, no, I think he's a great artist, and the fact that he's still performing and singing, he's about 87 or 88 now, and I saw him maybe a year or two ago, and he's still very, very strong as an actor and as a singer. I'm just amazed at his longevity.
As someone who participated in Klez Canada multiple times and who plays a bit of music, as you said earlier, what do you see how do you foresee the future of Jewish music in general, or klezmer music?
Well, the revival has been really, really a long time in coming, and it's you know, who knows where it's going exactly, because the number of people who speak and who've heard Yiddish at home is diminishing. I'm not talking about the ultra-Orthodox, and they're not usually fans of entertainment. But there is a strong revival, and there's younger people who are writing new music based on klezmer and forms, like David Buchbinder in Toronto, who did a terrific record called Havana, Odessa, or Odessa, Havana, I don't remember exactly, where he combines a klezmer with Cuban forms of music, and there's a tremendous interest in it, and it's going pretty strong. And there are klez camps, not just in Canada but in the U.S. And there's a group of entertainers that travels around the world performing it, and in Poland and in Eastern Europe there's a strong interest in the Jewish culture, the secular Jewish culture that was almost wiped out during the World War II. You know, there is nobody knows what the future will bring, but there is a lot of activity going on right now among performers and listeners to that music.
Well, although you said Theo Bikel was sort of part of the folk revival, I also believe he was part of the Yiddish revival. Do you see Yiddish as a plausible language going forward, or sort of dying out with future generations?
Well, you know, there are a few people who are trying to keep it alive, and you know, the coming of Israel and the importance of Hebrew to that relatively new state has sort of pushed Yiddish into the background, and there's lots of Hasidim, ultra-Orthodox, are having lots of children, and they speak Yiddish at home, but they don't believe in entertainment the way we understand it. So they don't participate in the secular culture. So it's an ongoing battle.
Well, thank you very much for doing the interview.
Okay.
Ya ba 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 bum 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 ya ba 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 bum bum.